Yeah, sure. So I'm James Irwin. I'm based in London. Got a studio here in London. Yeah, doing
And
image.
what is your piece called?
I think it's called Surfacecollider.
And when did you make it?
I made it at the end of no, yeah, I think the end of last year, the end of 2022.
And do you want to talk a little about like your workflow to creating it?
It's like a sort of it's an extension of a PhD project, like a practice-based PhD project, which is around the point at which code becomes image. So everything is made in the script editor, and so using well, the images are mainly generated by the environment texture wrapped around the world. Um, that's different every time you load into the space. Um, and you're kind of you when you walk into the space or enter the space, you're sort of enveloped by a series of randomly positioned like versions of the same object, which kind of envelop you in the world and which are difficult to get out of, but which have a reflective surface that's reflecting the environment map in different ways.
It's really fascinating. Yeah, I've never, I mean, every show on New Art City is completely different, but I've never seen one like that at all. It's like very, very out there.
Yeah, so, yeah. So I was trying to, what I was trying to do is get rid of the three dimensionality of it as a navigatable space. That's what I was trying to do, subvert that aspect of it, I think.
I
Make
think
it,
that's really cool. Or like virtual spaces, just by virtue of being 3D, end up borrowing a lot of vocabulary from the physical world. And we're always trying to think of like, how can you use virtual space in a different way that doesn't necessarily require that?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's
and
what I
there's
was in.
some text involved too, right? Does that generate in the same way every
Yeah,
time?
yeah. The text is coming in from a Twitter bot that I made that is which is tweeting out fine-tuned GPT-3 text based around the research that I'm doing for the PhD. So that will change. That does build through the time that it starts at the same point. It starts at the beginning of the Twitter bot timeline and just kind of refreshes every. I can't remember how I did it now, but every few seconds. Yeah.
Um, and so I guess you probably made this piece as the, the dense phase of the pandemic was winding down.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, what was your practice like before the pandemic?
I'm trying to remember. I think it involved more sort of photographic imagery than synthetic digital like images of the computer, like digital based based in like digital aesthetics. I think it was more folks. There was more sort of a conversation between photography and the digital image. But yeah, I think that's how it shifted. But I don't know if that's pandemic specific.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been thinking about this because New Art City is this kind of ready-made archive where all of the shows that have happened stay open, right? And we exist in large part because the pandemic took place. And so, we're here for the art and we're really like foregrounding that. But in some sense, a lot of it becomes this very specific zeitgeist of virtual space plus isolation. And so I've been trying to ask that question of
Yeah,
artists that we talk to.
yeah.
And had you worked much in virtual space before?
I was always using 3JS. Well, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been using 3JS. So yeah, and kind of overlaps with it's always quite difficult working. I would see like working in code and as working in virtual space. So like whether or not that becomes something which becomes like a digital print from a digitally generated or a code generated image. Um, So kind of trying to work in that with that relationship between virtual digital space and the gallery, I suppose, in a contemporary art sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I would agree with that assessment. And so, um, I assume you've shown in physical space before many times, right?
Yeah, but it's become more. It has become um, more like web-based now, actually, my practice.
Yeah, that's interesting to me. Or like, how do you negotiate like this the screen as the way of accessing your work? Or like, how do you feel about screens?
I I'm like I don't know actually. It's it's complicated, isn't it? It's hard to tell because you sort of lack the feedback that you would get like face to face. Zoom's good, or like sorry, these platforms, these like video call platforms, whatever you call them. They're good. Like as a means of I think that's one of the good things that's happened through the pandemic, like the sort of proliferation of video calling.
Absolutely. And have you shown in other virtual spaces besides New Art City, like Cyber or even like Distant Gallery or something like that?
No, not like I've shown with other digital like web-based platforms in the UK. Like there's this place called skelf.org.uk that I show with quite a lot. And I've put on like series of exhibitions like between like where I was trying to link writers and artists from the US with artists and writers from the UK. So like trying to bridge that divide because it seems like the US is way ahead of the UK in terms of how digital art is used as a contemporary art practice.
That's interesting, right? I feel like I was note or like it seemed like the Arts Council was throwing a ton of money at virtual stuff over the past few years. But yeah, I guess it's just different. Um, so I'm curious also, when was the last time you went into your space after you made it?
When was the last time I went in?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was last Wednesday. I showed my supervisor.
Um, and had it been a while since you'd been back before that?
I keep going back to check it's working.
That's good. Yeah, especially with custom code on New Art City,
Yeah,
things get updated, things break. How does it feel to come back to it?
I don't know. It's difficult to know when things are finished, isn't it? And so I think I'd like to kind of keep on changing like bits of it, like maybe how the text is generating, so it's different every time you're entering it in a different space in the timeline of the text. Um, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult because there's sound in there as well, and the sound like there's a lot of soundtracks, and I think they buffer depending on how much RAM the user has got on their computer.
Interesting. That's just like a performance thing because it's
I think
streaming,
it's
or yeah.
I think it's a performance thing. Yeah, yeah.
Um, have you thought much about how to visually describe the work? Because I know yours is different from most of them because it's not like artifact based.
Yeah. I don't know if I have thought about that really. It's kind of in terms, well, other than the sort of the fact that the environment is like a sort of a like 3D generated image. No, sorry, a digitally generated image which doesn't really refer to the natural world outside of the screen or beyond itself, and therefore tries to extend the language of what images that computers make might look like if they existed on their own. That's kind of what I'm interested in, that sort of thing.
Totally, that's super interesting. Okay, last question before we move on to the exhibition tour. Also, wow, your cat is gigantic.
Oh yeah. Sorry, you see Tinkerbell, yeah. She's big, yeah.
Um, this is not my cat, but this is my roommate's cat.
Oh, what are they called?
His name's Fritz.
Fritz.
He
Nice.
usually lives in the back house, but our friend's out of town, so he's hanging out with us. He keeps like headbutting my feet and trying to spin me around in my chair. Um, so the last question has to do with like archiving. Like how do you deal with archiving your work, especially as like variable media? And I guess a corollary question to that is like, do you often return to old files in your computer? And like, what's the oldest file that you have?
Okay. Yeah, I suppose what happens is like they just end up on a computer. If they're not on the web server somewhere, they'll end up on a computer which ends up sitting on a shelf or at the back of my under the bed or something like that, like in a place that I don't know. I'm not very good actually with digitally archiving my work. That is a weak point. That's definitely a weak point. But the oldest file it's probably actually like documentation of sculptures and things. So I used to make
Mm-hmm.
sculptures, so like yeah, like photographs of work from like 2005 or something.
Yeah, I empathize with the random old machines or like well, in this is like this is I've had this computer since I was 18, but his name is Theseus because every single part has been replaced over the years,
Yeah.
including the body itself. It was originally a 17-inch MacBook Pro and now it is a 15-inch MacBook Pro.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, but that's when you could actually replace the parts on MacBooks, wasn't it?
Good times.
Yeah. So is it still all right? Does it still work okay?
Oh yeah, the solid state drive is about 8 years old, so it needs to be replaced if I'm going to preserve it. But I mean, there's something so interesting, especially with code-based work. It's like, we've been preserving paintings for a really long time. It's like well known how to do this, but digital files, especially code-based work, it's so much more difficult. Like, every web server is like its own little morass of complexity.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's true. I don't. It's probably something that I need to get on top of actually, but it's difficult. I try and it's hard enough to keep on top of my desktop.
Yeah, I agree.
So this New Art City project with 6 minutes past 9 builds on research undertaken over the last 4 years at the Contemporary Art Research Centre, Kingston School of Art, where I'm doing a PhD at the point at which code becomes image. The research bypasses photographic or lens-based image-making techniques to speculate on the kinds of images machines make. The project foregrounds a visual language channeled through the collaborative process of working with computer software and hardware systems as a human subject. Resulting images are often weird and alien, distant from that which the eye is familiar with seeing outside of the psychedelic. These images offer little for us to cling to. The representative, which reaffirms ideas of self relative to the world we are familiar with, is left alone. As we interact through the screen, keyboard, and mouse with the code behind the work to bring the imagery to life, abstract patterns, colors, and shapes are summoned to the rectangular frame of the computer display. The images move and flicker in ways similar to the cyclical rhythms of other life forms. I'm interested in locating a vitalism within code-based imagery, one that alludes to or confirms how subjectivities extend beyond the boundaries of human bodies to inhabit machinic entities. This distributed subjectivity is consistent with, or perhaps speculates on, how modern life appears so fractured and anxiety-inducing. The project uses us, our human bodies, as a channel for synthetic imagery, and in doing so suggests a recombinant cyborg form. The human body is remodeled to include our computational appendages within its edges. This reposition of the subjective authorial voice folds back in on itself and resurfaces through the text-based output of the project. These writings sketch out a contextual framework for the work using a fine-tuned custom version of the large language model GPT-3 to generate text. They are written in real time at the point at which the user interacts with the web pages that house the imagery. as collaborative writings in ways that mirror how the images are made. They recombine the singular actions of the user or viewer with those of the artist and artificial intelligence to come into being. They redistribute the single voice of the writer across multiple bodies to build a continually evolving archive of database writing that acknowledges the network nature of more than human subjectivity. The project has also been used to experiment with sound composition across 3D digital space by sampling soundtracks ripped from YouTube ASMR videos and running them through digital processes enabled to live various ticks and whispers originating from human voices and actions were modified to sound like machines. The individual layers of the Ableton track were then exported individually and positioned at different coordinates within the New Art City worlds. These soundtracks are activated and layer up in different manifestations as the user moves through the space. The repeating rhythms and patterns of sounds made by machines but from human beginnings reinforce the visual elements of the work to produce a hyper-synthetic digitality.
It's really beautifully said. Before we go in, I'm going to give a basic visual description. We're still on the blocker page, and we can see these dark purple reflective shapes undulating through each other and clipping through the camera. On the bottom, there's a text box where the text refreshes every 30 seconds or so. And these are generated by GPT-3 from your Twitter bot, yes? Or this is the sequential reading of the bot itself?
Yeah, that's exactly right, yeah.
So I guess every so often, perhaps I'll interject and read some of the text, but why don't we go into the space and start hearing the sound? They have abstracted themselves out of their matrix and now act as agents in regard to that matrix. Lots and lots of colors, breathing. You can sense the reflectivity. Oh, in the distance, there's a big crumpled ball, but there are all of these other planes that are clipping through each other. We have, blacks and silvers and all of these fuzzy gradients. All clipping through each other. And as the planes go through the camera, they get more fuzzed out. In the fifth step, the future can be calculated, and it is, whoa, to engage in this action, it isn't necessary to know anything about historical images since they're all embodied functions. Everything is already calculated. We only need to receive this information. The sphere is slowly moving through the image, or towards us, or we're moving towards it. It's really hard to tell. And the patterns are getting less dense. So we have some greens, we have some blues. Oh, and now it's dense again. Now it seems like we're moving backward or it's moving away from us. To be so unemphatically legion of pure intelligence is freedom. Texture is getting a little more pearlescent. Lots of these like gray purples. This is not just a function of so-called advanced technical images, but rather that of images in general, including handmade ones. Chiefly all historical images, in some or right relationship to images, should take account not only of the power of calculation, but also of their embodiment. This can be seen as an aspect of the general theory of images. Now there's a big black hole in the center. It's slowly getting smaller as we move towards a manifold. It's so interesting. It's really hard to tell whether the background is moving or the camera is moving or both. In a way, technical images are pure experiences of surfaces. They're abstract pictures, four-dimensional mathematics. Clipped through a surface, and now the background is totally black. And now we're going back into the surface. And there's another surface that's creeping through on the side. And now it's like jittering and glitching through itself. Visual experiences must be graphed concept. Whoa. This dimension provides the basis for the emergence of a new four-dimensional space. Since the surfaces are no longer planes, but have really been extended over time, a completely new dimension has emerged, one that separates historical from synchronistic time. It's interesting how there are these like fluid movements of all of these surfaces, and then they occasionally jump in and out really quickly, or like jump cut themselves into the screen. Now these manifolds are kind of closing in on us, but you can see all of these different surfaces intersecting with one another. There's a very painterly quality to it. All of the reflectiveness, it's sort of watery. All these planes flashing in and out. One recedes and then another jumps in. Seems like most of the shapes are spheres, like crumply spheres. And then the camera distance is making it so we're kind of clipping through them. So yeah, there's a nice negative space in the center right now as one ball recedes on the right and another one's sort of flashing in on the left. Displacements and rescalings, margins and centers, abstract paintings, and plastic objects will gradually move out of the universe of becoming into the universe of being suggested by the information dimension. In other words, the history of images will decline into a preparation for critique, a critique that is called system theory. There's a lot of Feynman in this text. Following Feynman, I will call this preparation phase the preparation of a classical problem. The preparation of a problem of images in our case, the critique of images, will be divided into 6 steps. I always find myself racing the text because I feel like it's going to disappear at any moment. Was that intentional, or like making it so you may not be able to read it each time?
I think so. Yeah, I think it might have been. I must have landed on that, and then yeah, it sort of felt like it was like the frustrating element of it might be quite nice.
Your focus sort of gets drawn from the visual to the text to the visual to the sound. It's definitely disorienting. Yeah, I love the like fuzzed out texture when you get close to it. It's really like jittery. And these textures are being generated anew each time the space is loaded.
Yeah, there's like 4 or 5 different HDR images which are picked randomly when the space is loaded. Yeah.
And they're kind of reflecting one another also.
I think they are. I was going to see if I could have them like using different blend modes so that they, but then I think I just kept them so that they're properly opaque. But I don't know if they're reflecting each other also. They might be because I don't know if that sort of recursive thing happens.
Yeah, it seems like it is, or like the way that it looks like animated, because there are surfaces that are clearly reflective, and there are these. It's like the color is not coming from the shape itself, and now we're off into the black, and we're back into the shape again, up close to this manifold. More pearlescent colors, and then some like dark blues and grays and browns. To engage in this action, it isn't necessary to know anything about historical images since they are all embodied functions. Everything is already calculated. However, in this sixth step, there can be no more errors. Our freedom to make free decisions, to exercise free creativity has already been placed under numerical supervision. Off into the black, and it's back. Now we're getting back to the original ASMR sound at the center, I think. You so unemphatically legion of pure intelligence is freedom. And how, I'm trying to remember how is the text being generated, or like what are the prompts to generate it on?
Oh, so what happens is it's trained on 5 texts. So there's Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, Mark Fisher's The Word and the Eerie, uh, Catherine Hale's My Mother Was a Computer, Willem Flusser's Into the Universe of Technical Images, and one other which I shouldn't forget that I have. And so basically, I think I just gave it one simple prompt, which was um, synthetic, which was the first text which you see when you load the page, and it just takes that prompt and runs with it using that fine-tuned model as a guide.
Really cool. And how are the HDRs being generated?
Oh, they're generated in using Blender basically, but just from objects and scenes that I've. Oh no, what happened was I've made lots of images from like using the camera as a texture as a texture for digital 3JS spaces. So like virtual 3DS spaces, which I've like taken screenshots from map the camera image onto different digital objects in that space or GLTF objects in those 3JS spaces, and then use those screenshots to make HDR images, and which are kind of like, so they kind of become like the latest in the line of a digital process or something like that, a stepping stone or something.
That makes sense, kind of.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't that straightforward an explanation. The it's kind of like I tried to like make it a kind of a case of like digital images being in conversation with themselves across time.
I love that. Yeah, I just love everything clipping through everything else. And we're zooming out. Oh, and we're zooming in. Yeah, I love how the shapes are all kind of like breathing. Are the shapes themselves animated, beyond just sort of like rotating or moving?
Yeah, the shapes have got like cloth physics um, attached to them. So then they're like cloth physics with pressure. So they're kind of like inflating and deflating.
Oh, that's really interesting. And do you just animate that in Blender, or is that being done in 3JS?
That's been done in Blender, yeah. So they're quite heavy files, the GLTF objects.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've done a little bit of cloth simulation like that, and it's astounding how big the files can get so quickly.
Yeah, so I end up not using very many frames actually to try and keep the size of it down. So it will be like 40, I think each one's like 20 frames, and then I'll just like double it and reverse the second half, so it'll end up being 40 frames, but like a loop.
Hmm.
I haven't spent this much time in the space before. I'm quite enjoying melting into it. It's good.
Me
The
too.
experience is nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, well, it's like performing itself each time it's visited, and I think this is a really excellent kind of like documentation of the phenomenon. It definitely strains visual description, or like we have a basic sense of what the texture is like, but abstraction is always hard to describe in like a very resonant way.
Yeah, it's like weird little, some things surprise me with how the things clip. So sometimes
Yeah,
like
I love
little,
the shapes it makes with negative space also,
yeah,
or like because it's like you're always embodied as the camera in virtual space, and the avatar is really more like window dressing. And so I feel like in some sense this calls attention to the camera being your body. And it's like has this like totally different property where things can like move through you.
yeah, like or the relate, yeah, exactly. I think I'm interested in the relationship definitely between the virtual camera and the screen, and that sort of and the rectangle, which is the world of the screen.
Mm. Like, yeah, no, nothing on a screen is actually three dimensions. It's just it's not different from like a lenticular photograph.
Yeah, exactly. It's no, it's true. You don't often think, but these, especially virtual space, doesn't. Uh, it does really like take you into three dimensions, doesn't it? The illusion of three dimensions. Generally, it works. It's like those like even 3D modeling software. Like you feel like when you're using it, you're in a space that has depth to it.
Yeah, it is very convincing, or it's like it's like in some sense I don't know that the headset gets you any closer to that, or like I feel like a screen still manages to communicate this illusion.
Yeah,
What is VR but a special type of screen?
yeah, that's true. You don't. It doesn't make you feel like you're in three dimensions anymore, does it? Like you don't, because three dimensions you would be able to walk through, whereas VR you can't really move around that much as it sits so far,
Yeah.
in my experience of it anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's so interesting to see these dimensional objects kind of flattened into a 2D mass. Sphere clipping towards us and a sphere clipping away. And again, breathing into us.
The sound is I keep on trying to find the sound. I'm trying to locate the sound because I remember like um it's located on a flat plane, which I think is what would it be on the y-axis probably.
Mm-hmm. But now you're
So
really high up.
yeah, I think so. And so the closer you get to yeah, so you kind of it fades out.
I hear something coming. What was the inspiration to use ASMR sound?
So I think I'm wanting to look at the because that feels to me so human or so or the maybe it's because it's quite effective and works with like affect as a means of um, as a mode basically. So and I'm kind of interested in how we can get closer to um, working with digital technologies in a way where we're able to talk about um, how they like work in those registers like through affect and things like more easily or where it's not so behind the scenes and we're like just kind of led along by the digital, we're able to work with it in a way. I think that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but
I think I see what you mean. Or it's like in comparison to the form of like a song, ASMR is really meant to sort of short circuit or like hit you in the body.
yeah, make it fit. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It is interesting, like all of the movement kind of like it creates these like hollows in the space where it's like right now it feels quite two dimensional. Like you can kind of see an arc of one clipping through another, and then suddenly you can sense that it's moving towards you, and it's kind of like a wave, and now it's coming straight through the camera, and we've clipped through another one, and now it's breathing back in, and now we're moving a little bit. And then, yeah, there's this kind of cavernous quality where you can sense that you're like inside of something. It is the dimension of pure mathematical surfaces. Information underlies this dimension, so this dimension could be called the information dimension. It is interesting how I feel like virtual space or like technical art can often have kind of a short half-life in the mind, and to have these tours be a lot more like durational, it's kind of special to have this like durational experience with it, because even I might, might spend like 2 minutes in a space by myself to like get a sense of it, but yeah, this like co-presence together is really special.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice to hear you describing the work as well, Sammy. I'm really enjoying your descriptions of it.
Good. So how are you feeling on time? Should we keep exploring and reading, or do you think we've had enough?
I think we're good.
Excellent. Well, I will stop the recording now and we can chat a bit more.